This is E&P Reports, a vodcast from Editor and Publisher magazine, the authoritative voice of news media since 1884, serving newspapers, broadcast, digital, and all forms of news publishing.
And greetings once again, Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. As always, we kick off with housekeeping. Listening to this program on a podcast platform of preference. See, I got that out. Please follow us watching on our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button below me. Smash that bell to the right. You'll get an update each and every time we upload this weekly podcast series dedicated to the news publishing industry we call E&P Reports. Mike Beaudet, can you tell I was a disc jockey in my youth?
I feel that vibe.
Here's how we kick off these programs with famous people like you. Rather than looking at your LinkedIn background or your About Me page on some, broadcaster website, we go to ChatGPT. Do you understand how important that is in today's AI world? So I'm going to say to you what ChatGPT says about Mike Beaudet, and you tell me if it's, give it an A to an F. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Mike Beaudet is an investigative reporter and a professor. He's a journalist professor at Northeastern University and an investigative reporter for WCVB-TV, Boston's ABC affiliate. Beaudet has a reputation for exposing important issues, holding powerful entities accountable through his investigative work. You only got a paragraph, Mike. How did they do?
I'd give that an A. It's not very complete, but I think I give the AI an A for that, for accuracy at least.
Well, with our audience of news publishing executives and all that and more, is there any other aspects to your background you'd like to tag on?
I just feel like I'm at this lucky place where I'm at the intersection of the industry and academia. And so I get to do both, which I feel fortunate to do. So I've been teaching at Northeastern for 10 years now, and I did adjunct earlier at Emerson and Northeastern. So being able to have my foot in the industry, but also being able, hopefully, to shape the journalists of tomorrow in some way, hopefully in a positive way, I think I feel fortunate. So to me, that's an important part of my bio, that I like straddling those two worlds.
Well, the teaching part is what we're mostly going to be focusing on in this interview, because you are like the centerpiece of our cover story for our July issue. Local TV news takes Gen Z beyond broadcast. A 6-year study gleans insight into what resonates with younger news audiences. And we're going to unpack all of that on the backside of this message.
This episode of E&P Reports is exclusively sponsored by Blocks Digital, formerly Town News. Even though the name has changed, their commitment to the media industry is as strong as ever. Blocks Digital is now even better positioned to deliver integrated solutions like content management, audience development, advertising revenue, video management, and more. Join the over 2,000 news publishers worldwide that power their ongoing digital transformation with Blocks Digital, serving over 141 million monthly users who view over 6.5 billion pages of content each year. You can trust Blocks Digital to empower you, to connect you at scale with the community you need to reach. Blocks Digital, formerly Town News, now reimagined to help meet the news publishing challenges of tomorrow and beyond. Learn more at blocksdigital.com.
All right, Mike, I'm going to try to sum up the story we wrote. And of course, those listening on a podcast platform, go to editorandpublisher.com/podcast. We'll have a link to Gretchen Peck, our associate editor's work. And it was a great story. We loved publishing this. But basically, did you create the Reinventing Local News project? Are you associated with it? I know it was funded by the Stanton Foundation, and it's out of Northeastern. Do I have that right?
You do. And yes, I created it back in 2017. And we had actually been working with the Stanton Foundation on an unrelated grant, looking at public disclosures by officials and elected officials. And so obviously my world being in broadcast, and Stanton, Frank Stanton, the former president of CBS. And so I found that I hoped that it would be this opportunity, and we just, sort of clicked with the foundation and went back and forth on ideas, and they've been so supportive of what we're doing, and it really fits into their mold because they're all about strengthening democracy and sort of reaching the masses. And so I think doing research in the broadcast area just fits really nicely into that.
Well, basically, this is a project, correct me if I'm wrong, that's just trying to figure out how we can repackage our content to make sure we're pulling in a younger generation, the Gen Zs, if I can use that term. Do I have that right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you're finding the best ways to make sure the content can be absorbed by newer audiences. Is that right?
Exactly. And really the genesis of it came from being in the classroom and showing my work, showing colleagues' work, and students sometimes would just question it. And you could see this disconnect between younger people and what we're doing on the broadcast side. And they would just question everything and be like, well, why do you light things this way? Why do you tell stories this way? Why does everyone sound this particular way on TV? And so it just got me thinking that we're missing this opportunity. And then obviously the digital revolution has changed everything. And so it's like, how do we reach young people where they are? Even my students who are interested in broadcasting and television, most of them aren't sitting down and watching a newscast at 6 o'clock or 11 o'clock. That's just not how they consume content. It's all on their phones. And so that's what it's really about, is like, we have this infrastructure with the broadcast industry, and it's doing well comparatively to a lot of other media industries. And so how do we sort of translate that and grab hold of this audience and meet them where they are? So that's really what it's all been focused on.
No, and I get that. I mean, we're broadcast, because I was back in the day, managing a station where, you run that, you do a little morning, you do your morning thing, and then the Today Show or whatever comes on, and then you're really focusing on that, 4 to 6:30 p.m. block, or 5 to 6, or where you're trying to capture that audience, and maybe something at 11, but it's all about that time. Everybody's going to sit down in front of their TV or turn it on while they're cooking dinner. Those days are over for a younger generation. They don't think in terms of watching a program at a certain time. I get that. But this goes beyond broadcast, doesn't it? I mean, any news publishing organization should understand, like, for example, in the article, we talk about how at WCVB, you piloted a project to use OTT to do short form video, correct, of the larger block content you produce at the TV station, correct? And
Exactly.
And it worked, right? I mean, you brought in, your TikTok viewership jumped massively. Am I right?
It did. And it's like, I think the key is like focusing on these digital platforms. I think as a whole, broadcasters, media organizations sort of give lip service to digital. They know it's important, but they're not necessarily making as much money on the digital side yet. Right. They're not investing, they're not paying attention, they're just repackaging their content. But when you actually pay attention to it and say, we're going to produce content specifically for digital, whether it's the website or social media, you actually can get some traction, we're finding.
At WCVB, and I know you're on the content side, not the dirty ad side that I come from, the dark side or whatever. Are you making money with it? Did that digital growth prove maybe to senior management, looking at every expense and top line revenue, it's important that there's an audience you can monetize this way?
Well, we're hoping. I think that's really what this fellowship. So we have 4 fellows that are working in television stations right now for this year of experimentation. And that's the goal. It's like, how do you get an audience, but how do you monetize it? And I think that's what we're trying to figure out and research. And hopefully we're seeing trends based on the metrics that we can gather right now from the TV stations, but we're going to be doing a deeper analysis of that and trying to figure out, like, obviously, how do you make it profitable? But I do think it's an investment that people need to make. You can't just look at the bottom line now, because if you're waiting to make the money, you're going to miss the boat. Like, we need to be focusing on this now and know that creating this content is important. And I do believe that we're going to figure out a way to monetize it.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and our reporting on the ad side, some of the most knowledgeable prognosticators are predicting, Mike, that this may be the last year where you guys are, in broadcast, are going to have a windfall of political and automotive. You see what I'm saying? Like, those two massive amounts of money that you bring in on a demand level may not be there. So ownership of local content across all your audiences and first party data is everything.
Absolutely.
For the future of all media. So let me break down the story now. Gretchen, I think, did an amazing job writing this thing. You mentioned something that I didn't understand. See, here, I'm the nerd, right? On our team, we have an editorial team that writes, they want to write 3,000 word, 4,000 word enterprise journalism. and I'm seeing the metrics that no one's going beyond the third paragraph. Do you see what I'm saying? And
Right.
I'd rather pay that journalist to write 5 stories, like an CEO's, but I'm not a journalist, right? I'm just the guy looking at the numbers. You said, and you were quoted saying this, it's a misnomer that Gen Zs don't like long form journalism. Am I correct?
I think they do I think it's both. I think they want short form because think of, I know my kids who are, 19 and 21 and just students that I see. I mean, everyone's on their phones, they're flipping, they want the TikTok, that feed is coming and changing and everything's quick. And if you're not interested, you move on to the next thing. So I think they do appreciate, interesting content and they're going to move on quickly if it's not engaging them. But I also find that if you produce good content, they will stick around. And so I think part of what we've proven in our earlier phases of the research is that when we made the stories longer, people did like them. When we added context and historical footage and made the, added interviews and just made the stories more interesting, that people will stick around. So I think it's that balancing. It's like, if you're going to make it long, it better be good. It better be engaging. It better support that.
All right.
But I think you need to give it to them in lots of different formats. And that's what we're experimenting with now with our fellows. They're creating longer form content. In some cases, we're having them produce documentaries that might be 15, 20 minutes, but then they're slicing and dicing those up and trying to come up with some social reels that will, get people's attention and hopefully make them want to watch the longer content.
Well,
So
define good. Hold on. I got to define good. You said good content, compelling content. What's the secret sauce? Is there something we should all be looking at as we look at the content, whether we're a news publishing newsroom with a legacy press or a legacy transmitter or a digital startup? It don't matter. How do I get? What do I? Because remember, in the old days, it bleeds, it leads. Remember that?
Yeah.
Are there a couple of bullets you could suggest on what you use from your content to get that eyeball to just love you?
Yeah, I mean, again, if we all knew the recipe, we'd all be making millions, right? But I think authenticity is really important with the younger audience. I think people want, and I think that's a shift for some broadcasters, right? Because I think we've been doing broadcasting essentially the same way for decades. And so I think telling stories in a different way, being more natural, so authentic. I think they want a messenger who they can relate to. So I also think that means like younger people. Like we need to hire younger people if you want to attract younger people. But then topics that people care about. One of our fellows in Boston did a story about Boston nightlife. This was a story that the student researchers, came up with looking at, is Boston like not cool because things closed down? That story has like blown up online, right? And it's gotten all sorts of attention. So I think it's like finding a topic area that's interesting to people and then giving real content. They hired a night czar in Boston and
right.
Our fellow went out and interviewed the night czar and like, how are they changing things to try to attract more people and make it a hipper city? So I think, the content has to be relatable and then it has to be presented in a way that's interesting and authentic. So I think it's balancing all of that.
Now, another thing you mentioned in the article, which I found fascinating, and I agree with, I spoke years ago at a college newspaper association convention in Washington, D.C., and I attended a lot of the panels. And one of the outsiders was screaming, "You're not teaching people the business. You're all, they're living in a little bubble in these." You kind of, and I don't want to be disparaging to university J schools, but you mentioned that we should be looking for talent outside of the journalists. Do I have that right? I don't want to put words in your mouth, sir.
Well, the second phase, I think in some cases, yes. So the second phase of our research, we focused on animation and we created positions in Boston and Chicago for a year. We called them visual content producers, but they were trained animators and we went to animation schools to find these people. And what was interesting is both the people that took the fellowships hadn't majored in journalism, but both of them ended up falling in love with journalism and both are, still in the business and doing well. So I think keeping an open mind for some of these positions of where you're pulling your talent from. I do think J schools, obviously, I teach in a J school and I think we provide an important backbone, especially on the journalism side. But I think keeping an open mind to everyone doesn't have to take the traditional path. I don't think they do. And so depending on what position you're trying to fill, I think you can look inside and outside of J schools.
you teach at a great J school. I mean, there's no question. Northeastern, right? I mean, we've had Dan Kennedy. You know Dan, right? We've had
Oh
him
yeah,
on the
Dan's
program
great.
as well. Okay, so let's get into the weeds on that. You're teaching the youth of today at a journalism entity. Do people still want to be journalists? How are they looking at this industry? Because remember, you said, in a way, we both know that having that transmitter at your TV station means nothing today, right? I mean, no one's really watching over an antenna anymore and really focusing on a program at a certain time of day. People are cutting the cable cord. We're all in this streaming world where Wild West, we're trying to figure out where the content's coming from, how it's being consumed. And like 20 years from now, they'll look back at this era, it's over time. Are, are these kids motivated to join this weird ecosystem right now? And are you seeing that fire in their belly to be that necessary part of our constitutional republic, that final check on power?
I think there are a lot of students that still have that passion. We have like incredible storytellers who are going through our program and who, believe strongly in democracy and exposing wrongs and being a voice for the voiceless. And so I think there are still a lot of people that want that and want that traditional route, but we're also seeing people that, want the journalism education, but might be thinking about, digital platforms, right? Or social media, or thinking about public relations, God forbid, right? But other things other than just the traditional journalistic pathway. And so I think, journalists, I think the education, and we always say this to our prospective students, is still whatever you go into, it's a really good foundation in terms of like being able to communicate, being able to write, being able to tell story. Every industry needs someone like that, a communicator who can effectively, tell a story. So I think we're preparing people to be communicators, and a lot of them go the traditional route, but a lot of them go different routes as well. And so it's just kind of, I'd say it's across the board. And as we also have a lot of bad publicity, right, in terms of the media industry now, and you're hearing about layoffs. So I think, parents sometimes get a little scared sending their kids to J schools and dishing out tens of thousands of dollars to do that. So we try to like prepare them and find their passion and give them the different routes that they can take so that they can have a career that they're passionate about, but also, make money and be successful.
How famous are you within the broadcast industry now? I'm not making a joke when I say, I mean, is this all happening like in a little tiny, ecosystem, or is the word traveling to other stations, other entities? Are people reaching out to your project now from different areas saying, what have you learned? What can I do now? How is it growing? Are you seeing, are you seeing it just, start to become more and more and more part of the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think our research is really industry focused and has been since the beginning. So everything we do is like aimed at the industry and trying to communicate and give them roadmaps and pathways to sort of navigate this new landscape that we're in. And every time we publish something, we get a lot of reaction from the industry, from whether it's reporters and producers, news directors, general managers. We've had a ton of interest in what we're doing. So I think, the industry's hungry for answers, right? I think we don't have the answers, but I think people appreciate that we're experimenting and trying different things. And I think these fellowships, because it's being funded through, a foundation and our project, the stations have nothing to lose, right? We're saying like, put these people in your newsroom for a year. Let's experiment. Let's have them just work on digital. And people are saying, okay, you're paying for it. We have nothing to lose. And then they're seeing the results and they're saying, wait a minute, this is working. It appears to be working. Like we're right in the throes of this latest phase, but our goal is to be able to convince stations like why they should hire these OTT streaming content producers in their newsrooms, why they should make it a paid position on their digital team for someone to specifically produce content for digital. So the industry's been very receptive, I will say that. And so that's, I think, what keeps us motivated, that people want answers and people enjoy talking about sort of the future and where do we go from here.
Challenge I have on this program is our audience is vast and diverse. You'd likely have a few CEOs of major news media organizations hearing your words, and you got a lot of people that are just starting or they're just a small family operation trying to get the school board information and city council information up in their small communities. And they sometimes, email me or text me or, say, all the stuff you talk about is for the big guys. I can't do that here. Just give me some useful thing I can do just to make payroll. What do you say to the small operations? Should they do everything they can now? Go find a local college and incubate it on their own, find interns, get the kid in there and tell them to have fun. Is that what you would suggest right now? I mean, don't put this off to every single news publishing entity.
Absolutely. And if you say like, well, I don't have I don't have the dollars to add a body to payroll, right? Well, that's fine. Well, think about the bodies that you do have and how you're allocating people, right? And so if you have a staff of 5 reporters, can you pull one of those reporters one day a week and they're focusing specifically on digital, right? Can you just really rethink within the infrastructure that you have, right? Within the group you have. But yeah, we can't wait. I think stations for too long have, all media has been sort of like sitting back. I can remember when I first got, when the web was new, right? We remember those days back in the 90s, and we didn't want to put any of our content on there, right? We were like, we can't put it on there because then they're not going to watch TV. And so I feel like obviously we all are breaking news online now, and have been for years, but I think we're still slow to fully embrace the power of digital, and that it's, it's the future, but it's also the now. And so I think if you're not investing in it and you're not like prioritizing it, then you're missing out and you're going to be behind.
How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is 1, but the light bulb has to want to change in the first place. Mike Beaudet, investigative reporter of WCVB TV in Boston, on loan to us for this 20-minute interview. And of course, professor of journalism at Northeastern University and founder of a very important, very innovative program called the Reinventing Local News Project. Mike, we appreciate your valuable time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.